Okay, so tonight we are starting a new chapter, still on non-violence, but more on the mental aspect, the psychoanalysis of conflict. Previously, we covered on the ethics on the precepts, and talk about non-violence, especially about killing. We talk about the factor of perception and intention. So all this actually the mind, because mind is the forerunner. So tonight we're talking about more on the mind, the processes. What are the various chain reaction, what's going on in the mind that result in all these unwholesome decisions. Okay, next. Okay, so if you look at this diagram, it will look quite intimidating. So I'll just break down for you. We call this the 12 links of dependent origination. Why 12 links? If you look at the wheel, the outer rim of the wheel have 12 terms. So these 12 terms are the 12 links, and these are basically the cognitive process on attachment. Cognitive process of cognition and attachment. So that's the dependent origination. So I've given quite an extensive talk before in Dhammayut on the whole series on dependent origination. So this is like a quick and brief kind of run through or preview. So how to work with this wheel? We're going to look at, imagine it's like a clock. So we're going to look at the 12 o'clock direction and go clockwise. You can forget about the inner chart, inner part of the pie. They talk about past causes, present effect, present causes, future effect. You can ignore this for the moment. Just ignore this. We're just going to look at the outer rim. So the words are, we start off with ignorance. And we're going to go in a clockwise direction. So ignorance is basically, as long as we are not enlightened, all of us will have ignorance. Only an arahant and above can overcome ignorance. So what happens is, even a non-returner and below still have this defilement of ignorance. So when a person has ignorance, it will condition mental formations, which is the second link, mental formations. So mental formations is part of our 5 aggregates. So we've covered this in the first lesson. Mental formations is the 4th aggregate. Anything that forms, anything that produces, it's called mental formations. Another term for it is called karmic formations. Your karma. Whatever ripens. Whatever you experience now is due to the ripening of certain past karmas. So we're going to do an experiment later. Okay, then the next one is consciousness, the 3rd link. If you go down clockwise, consciousness means your awareness. You have your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. And the next one is called mind and matter. Mind and matter. So the mind and matter again is the 5 aggregates. Matter is the form. Mind is actually the feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness. So it's a bit like repetitive. And the next link is called 6 senses. So the 6 senses are your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These are our 6 senses. And then you have contact. After 6 senses, you go clockwise again, contact. Contact means contact to the external objects. Okay, for example, how does all these things link? So from ignorance to mental formation, consciousness, mind, matter, and 6 senses, how are they related? For example, if you look at the screen, which sense organ are you using? Your eyes, right? So The eye require your eye consciousness. That means you're aware of the screen. Agree? You're aware how the color, the words, and the pictures. Agree? Correct? Okay, so that itself, when you are aware of what you're looking, we call it contact. And let's say we switch our attention from seeing to hearing. That jump from seeing to hearing, that jumping is called mental formation. New formation, then new consciousness arises from the ear and based on the external sound. So it's very fast. So from number 1, ignorance, all the way to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to contact and even feeling very fast. So when you, let's say, have eye contact, you look at the screen, you may have pleasant feeling, you may have neutral feeling, you may have unpleasant feeling, you may like the font, you may not like the color. So you have all these feelings. It's a mixture. So all these things, they move around all the time. So from seeing to even touching, the contact to the seat. Or let's say you whole day at work, then you come and attend this class, you have some body fatigue. So you have bodily contact, bodily unpleasant sensation maybe. Yeah, so all this, the attention, this mind is running around through your 6 senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So mind is basically the things you want to think about, your workplace, what are you going to do later, maybe what kind of dinner or supper you're going to take later. So all these are your 6 senses. Yeah, so the mind is always moving around. So that movement is called karmic formations or mental formations. And when you move, all 5 aggregates will appear. Form, feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness. So this is the mind matter part through your 6 senses. Okay, then what happens next? After feeling, then you'll have craving. So if a person is not mindful, they have unpleasant feeling, then they'll react with anger. Anything you don't like, you want to fight, you want to get rid of, you react with anger. So this craving is the cause of your suffering. The cause of your suffering, we call this man-made suffering. If you experience a pleasant feeling, let's say you like what you see, you like what you hear, then you may react with greed. You may react with greed. So it's either greed or anger. Mainly these two. We talk about these two first. So these are the cravings. Because of craving, this force, this craving is actually the intention. We talk about intention, right? Intention to kill. So if let's say aversion, the mosquito come, you don't like the mosquito, give you unpleasant feeling, bite you, give you unpleasant feeling. Then you have this aversion. So this aversion arises because of craving. And then if you look at the words on the right, the column on the right, you see there's a factor of perception. Because in the wheel, there's no mention of perception. Usually the dependent origination model, there's no mention of perception. So where does perception come about? You want to talk about fulfilling the perception of. So perception come about. Okay, so there are 2 suttas that mention perception. So the one sutta called the Majjhima Nikaya number 18, they will say after contact, they have feeling, then perception. So they label or they place perception after feeling. So after your feeling, then all types of perception will come. The mind will create based on your... Okay, because when we are young, let's say when we are toddler, we don't learn things in terms of words, right? We learn things in terms of feel. So you either have pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling or neutral feeling. So most of our memories are based on feelings. or at least this is the most basic function the mind will work before we make it more complicated. So based on the toddler, the feeling, you give the toddler certain toy. If they have unpleasant feeling, then they'll cry lah. If they have pleasant feeling, they like the toy, then they'll laugh lor. They'll laugh, then they'll hee hee ha ha, make a lot of nice noise. So this is the perception based on the feelings. So the child will perceive the object based on feelings. So you have all the perceptions and categories of this. We call it, there's a term called Papanja. Papanja means the categories of perception, stereotyping, classifying, discriminating. So all these are part of perception. So we start to learn to stereotype and discriminate and give all kinds of labeling based on this perception. Okay, then another sutta, Digha Nikaya 21 at the bottom right, it talks about perception of categories. Okay, because the first sutta on top, after they mention the perception and categories of this Papanja, then they stop there. Then another sutta will elaborate further. What happens after you have these perceptions and categories of these thought processes? Then you have further thinking. You have further thinking. So after further thinking, then you have craving. So basically, if you look at the wheel, in between feeling and craving, there's lots of things going on. Lots of categorizing and memories and maybe past traumas or past fantasies, whatever. Okay, then you have desire. So after desire, you have what is dear and not dear. What and dear is not and not dear is equivalent to clinging or attachment. You are attached to someone or not attached to someone or something. So it's dear and not dear. Then later on you have envy and stinginess. Very close to becoming. Yeah, so if you're stingy, then you're very possessive. Very possessive. Then after envy and stinginess, you have rivalry and hostility. So rivalry and hostility is basically the sufferings, birth, aging, sickness and death, which is the rest of the chart. So that's one whole round, from ignorance all the way to aging and death. All the way to aging and death. So I won't classify this wheel as what past or future causes and what present causes or present effects. Actually, all these things are linked together. They are linked together. Right now, we are experiencing aging, right? Agree? We are in the process of aging and decay. So this is present also, not future. So we are in the process. So it's happening all the time. It's all linked together. Right? So we are going to talk about this one wheel, which is the causation for suffering. Causation for suffering. So this is actually the first two noble truths. In Buddhism, we talk about the four noble truths. First one, the suffering. Second is cause of suffering. Then the third one is the cessation of suffering. And the fourth one is the noble eightfold path leading to the cessation of suffering. So basically, this wheel presents the first two noble truths. So the first noble truth talk about aging, sickness and death, and the clinging of these aggregates is basically from attachment all the way to aging and death. Basically the 9 o'clock direction all the way to 12 o'clock. You see attachment, becoming, birth, aging, death. So that's the first noble truth. A second noble truth talks about the craving. Second noble truth, craving that cause suffering, which is actually the 7 o'clock direction, this craving. You will look at the wheel, craving. So greed and anger, basically. And if you look at the rest of the chart, the pie chart, from ignorance all the way to feeling, all these are basically, we call it your reflex action. your reflex action. You can't do anything about it. It is only from craving onwards, then is our self-inflicted suffering, man-made reaction. Whatever you see, hear, smell, think, and touch, you cannot control one. But whatever comes to after contact, then we choose to react. We react with either anger, fear, or greed. And so all this reaction is the intention. So the craving is basically the kinds of unwholesome intention that cause the suffering. So that's the whole idea. And if you want to talk about the third and fourth noble truth, you need to apply again from the craving direction. After you, from ignorance, this mental formation, consciousness, mind matter, six senses, contact, feeling, then you need to apply the right thought. If you experience any unpleasant or pleasant feeling, we generate right thought, wish the contact well and happy, wish all the aggregates well and happy, and then that's to reduce anger. Then we think of impermanence to reduce greed. So we tackle greed, and once we reduce craving, then we lessen the clinging, we lessen attachment, then we lessen becoming, lessen this envy and stinginess, and then we reduce the so-called pain from this birth, aging, sickness, and death. So that is the moment-to-moment way of looking at the dependent origination. So of course there's the more popular interpretation of these 12 links. They'll interpret it in terms of the 3 lifetimes. So I won't talk about it. We'll talk about the here and now, something more practical. You don't have to wait until your next birth to experience no rivalry and hostility. We talk about here and now, how you apply, what kind of thought processes, how to let go, and how to be at peace with the situation. So that's the idea. Okay, so any questions at this point before I move on? I need to make sure everybody's on the same page, because if you're lost, then it's a bit hard to proceed. Can understand, Okay, so then I proceed. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya 18, talks about the processes from the ignorance all the way to perception. Ignorance to perception. So the Buddha gave a sermon to some monks. So a brief statement by the Blessed One. If, with regard to the cause whereby the perceptions and categories of objectification assail a person, that means thoughts of discrimination, stereotyping, opinions, there is nothing there to relish, welcome, or remain fastened to, then that is the end of obsessions of passion, the obsessions of resistance, the obsessions of views, the obsessions of uncertainty, the obsessions of conceit, the obsessions of passion for becoming, the obsessions of ignorance. So basically the Buddha says, if there is no craving, you do not welcome, you do not relish, you do not fasten, you do not cling to them, then you have no more suffering, no more ignorance, no more all those things. That is the end of taking up rods and bladed weapons, of arguments, quarrels, disputes, accusations, divisive speech, and false speech. That is where these evil, unskillful things cease without remainder. So to end all conflict, it starts from oneself. Our attitude towards the situation. Do we still pursue and fight, or do we let go? So the Buddha's sermon is like that only, very short. Maybe 1 or 2 minutes only, he finished already. And then you invite me to give how many? 2-hour talk. So the Buddha, in his time, he just give 1 or 2 minutes sermon, then he stopped. Then the monks do not understand what the Buddha mean, So short. How to practice? Then the monks went to another monk called Venerable Mahakachana. So this monk is foremost in analyzing the short statements of the Buddha. He's very good at analyzing and give like detailed explanation. So we go on to the next slide. Okay, so this Venerable Mahakachana was approached by these monks that attended the Buddha's sermon. Then Mahakachana initially quite reluctant, maybe very humble. So he said, why don't you ask the Buddha for the definition, for the meaning? Why do you ask him for what? Then the monk said, the Buddha straight away went back to rest already, no chance to ask him. So this member Mahakachana, okay, out of compassion, then he kind of give this detailed explanation. Okay, so we talk about how the six sense bases and consciousness are related. So this is the Buddhist formula of consciousness, or at least one of the definition of consciousness. Dependent on I and forms, I consciousness arise. So dependent on your eye organ, dependent on the forms, the external forms like your screen, the words, or the things in a room, then I consciousness arise. That means awareness from seeing arise. So they are all dependent on each other. It's not like consciousness is like, it's not like as though consciousness is a separate entity. So if a person want to practice understanding dependent origination in terms of detachment, they have to redefine consciousness as this dependent arising consciousness. Depend on this factor, depend on these parameters, then certain consciousness arise. It's not a fixed entity, it's an always changing entity. Always changing kind of mind state. Yeah. So the meeting of the three is contact. So when your eye and the external form you see and the consciousness meet together, then we call it contact. That means it's called focused attention. Focused attention. For example, right now there can be 1,001 things happening, but we are not omniscient. We do not know, we are not aware of everything all the time. I always give this example. If let's say, before I mention paying attention to your heartbeat, you never pay attention to your heartbeat, right? Only when I mention heartbeat, then you pay attention to your heartbeat. So that is called contact. And depending on your nervous system, then your attention, you kind of zoom in to that heartbeat, then you're aware, I have heartbeat. But before you're aware of this heartbeat, is your heart beating? Yeah, your heart is beating. If your heart is not beating, that means you're not alive. It means you have some issues. So that zoom in attention, we call it contact. And when there is contact, then there arises feeling. With contact as a requisite condition, there is feeling. So you feel, can be the heartbeat, can be the image, can be whatever. You have feelings, three types of feelings, whether you find it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Then when you feel, then there is this perception, perceives, labels in the mind. So all the labels is basically based on our memories, like all the terms and the jargons, the words we learned before, all the good and bad experiences, all the can be bad or good experiences. All these labels will come together as a package. When one perceives, one thinks about it, so you ponder. Then you have all the fight or flight instinct. What one thinks about, one complicates. Then you start to have worry, restlessness. Then you have plan for the future or fantasize about the past. Based on what a person complicates, the perceptions and categories of objectification assail him or her with regard to past, present and future, forms cognizable via the eye. So this is just one sense door. And then they repeat with all the other sense doors. Same with the hearing. Based on what you hear, the same formula, the whole chunk all the way to from the ear and the forms and the ear consciousness arise. And same with the tongue, the taste, the nose, the smelling, and the thoughts, the thinking, and the body and the tactile sensations. So all these things, when you think and complicate, and then all this will assail a person. So all the 6 senses. So if you look at the picture on the right, you have all the 6 senses, different types of consciousness. Your eye consciousness, the nose, the mind, the ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, and the body consciousness. 6 senses. Okay, next. Now, when there is the I, when there are forms, when there is I consciousness, it is possible that one will delineate, a delineation of contact. Delineate means, based on what I checked from the dictionary, means to describe clearly. At least that's what the dictionary says. Okay, so when there is a delineation of contact, it is possible that one will delineate a delineation of feeling. So that means you can discern. When there is a delineation of feeling, it is possible that one will delineate a delineation of perception. Okay, so if a person wants to practice, to sharpen your mindfulness, then you catch all these processes. You catch all these processes. When there is a delineation of perception, it is possible that one will delineate a delineation of thinking. When there is a delineation of thinking, it is possible that one will delineate a delineation of being assailed by the perceptions and categories of objectification. So same with all the other sense doors. So this is his description. Then we move on to another sutta. Still in the same sutta. Okay. Don't have to. The next slide. Sorry. Okay. Now, when there is no I, when there is no forms, when there is no I consciousness, it is impossible that one will delineate a delineation of contact, and so on and so forth. When there is no delineation of contact, it is impossible that one will delineate a delineation of feeling. When there is no delineation of feeling, it is impossible that one will delineate a delineation of perception. When there is no delineation of perception, it is impossible that one will delineate a delineation of thinking. When there is no delineation of thinking, it is impossible that one will delineate a delineation of being assailed by the perceptions and categories of objectification. Wow, this one like Rao Koling like that. Okay, so it means if there is no contact, then there is no issue. So that's one way of looking at it. If you do not see the problem, do not hear of the problem, then there's no need to argue and fight over the problem. So that's one way of looking at it. So that's the mundane way of solving problem. So it doesn't really tackle the craving part. So we also talk about independent origination. If a person immediately try to remove ignorance, when they cease ignorance, they cease consciousness. So this one a bit more chim. So we won't talk too much on that first. So there's a few ways to go about it. So one way is if a person, let's say, they enter all the different levels of concentration all the way to cessation. So through cessation, they cease ignorance and consciousness and so on. So that's one way of so-called having no consciousness, the 5 aggregate consciousness. So they will activate a new type of consciousness, an enlightened being consciousness, an enlightened mind consciousness. So they are not operating or basically not over-relying on the 5 aggregate consciousness. They are not attached to the 5 aggregate consciousness. So they have for enlightened being, they have a new state of mind that is like ever present while the 5 aggregates are operating. So only when an enlightened being passes away, then it's called final nirvana or final nibbana, where the 5 aggregates are gone. Right, so there are these things Yep. So there's a few ways of interpreting this. So I've talked about the mundane way of interpreting. That means if you totally don't see the problem, don't hear, then you have no issue. So it's a good temporary fix. It doesn't remove the root cause, doesn't overcome the craving. The defilements may be still there. But if a person overcome the root cause, overcome ignorance, overcome craving, overcome ignorance, then again, then there's no more attachment. Okay, next. Okay, so this sutta will talk about what will happen after this perception and discrimination and these categories of objectification. So this one is a conversation between Sakka, the Deva king, and the Buddha. So it's a conversation, it's a Q&A session between the two. So their Q&A session can be quite interesting. So if a person observes the conversation between the Devas and towards the monk or towards the Buddha, their conversation is not too technical. So some people may say, oh, the Abhidhamma is attributed by the Buddha giving sermon to the Dhamma, to the Devas, but based on most of the conversation is not too technical. It's something like this, a bit more practical. Okay, so it started off like this. Sakka, the Deva king, asked him his first question. Fettered with what? Dear sir, though they think, may we live free from hostility, free from violence, free from rivalry, free from ill will, free from those who are hostile. Do Devas, human beings, Asuras, Nagas, Gandhabas, and whatever other many kinds of beings there are, nevertheless live in hostility, violence, rivalry, ill will with those who are hostile? So this heavenly being, this Sakka Deva Raja, the Deva king, is in the realm of the 33 kings, 33 gods. So basically it's like something like a confederation of 33 civilizations, and they will like choose one person to be the head. So this Sakka Deva Raja, Sakka Deva king, he is the head of this particular confederation. So this realm is, according to the chart of these 31 realms of existence, it's 2 realms above the human realm. So above the human realm, you have the realm of the 4 heavenly kings, then followed by this one, Tawatingsa, this realm of the 33 gods. So this Sakka Deva Raja is above the 4 heavenly kings. And then you see the terms here, you see these Asuras, Nagas, Gandhabas. So Nagas and Gandhabas are part of the 4 great heavenly kings. So they are 1 realm above the human realm. So they may live among the humans as an earthbound deity, earthbound spirit, or they may be skybound. Yeah, so these are the Nagas and the Gandhabas. So they are the different races. There are 4 races. Then Asuras, depending on who is classifying them, they could be below the human realm or above the human realm. In the Tibetan sixth realm of existence, the wheel of life, the Asuras are above the human realm. Probably they live longer than humans. And these Asuras are always having battles. Always have battles with this Sakka Devaraja, the realm of the 33 kings. So this Asura realm, they are actually heavenly beings also. So they are probably like the renegade realm. They are out of the confederate. It's a bit like Star Wars, then they kind of fight among themselves. So these Asuras and the realm of the 33. So heavenly beings also fight. Heavenly beings also fight. So this Deva asked the Buddha, how come even though we want peace, we want everyone to be free from violence, but yet why is there still fighting? So this is like a practical question. Because he's a ruler, this Deva is a ruler, he's like a king, so he wants to have peace in his supposed rule. So the Buddha answered, Blessed One, when asked, replied, Devas, human beings, Asuras, Nagas, Gandhabas, and whatever other many kinds of beings there are fettered with envy and stinginess. So most beings we have are fettered with envy and stinginess, which is why even though they think, may we live free from hostility, free from violence, free from rivalry, free from ill will, free from those who are hostile, they nevertheless live in hostility, violence, rivalry, ill will with those who are hostile. So stinginess, that means a kind of possessiveness, my resources, my land, my property, my this, my that. So once you have this sense of ownership, then other beings have different boundaries of ownership. So if they feel, or if we feel that their boundary has crossed our boundary, then you have issues already. So if you are, depends on how giving you are or how selfish you are. If we are unable to let go, we are stingy for whatever reason. Some can be due to maybe national sovereignty of the place, then you're unable to give an inch. Many reasons. Because of this, then they will give rise to certain hostility or perceive the other group to be hostile. Okay, next. Then Sakka, having delighted in and expressed his approval of the Blessed One's words, asked him a further question. But what, dear sir, is the cause of envy and stinginess? So knowing there's envy and stinginess not enough. What is the root cause of this envy and stinginess? What is their origination? What gives them birth? What is their source? When what exists, do they come into being? When what doesn't exist, do they not? So this Deva want to know how to stop this envy and stinginess. How does it arise and how does it not arise? So the Buddha answered, envy and stinginess have dear and not dear as their cause. So dear and not dear is basically attachment. What is dear to you, what is not dear to you. Having dear and not dear as their origination, having dear and not dear as what gives them birth. Have dear and not dear as their source. When dear and not dear exist, they come into being. When dear and not dear are not, they don't come into being. So we are stingy because we are attached to that thing. So let's say if a person is stingy towards money, because they like money, so they treat this money as something dear and precious to them. So when someone, let's say, take their possession, take away the money, then you feel very upset. you feel angry. Agree? Yeah? So it can be anything, like it can be money, your possession, your clothes, your house, your property, and all those stuff. So all these are envy and stinginess, dear and not dear. Any questions so far? Clear? Okay, if it's clear, then we move on. Next slide. Okay. Then, so dear and not dear is basically attachment. Okay. But what, dear sir, is the cause of dear and not dear? What is their origination? What gives them birth? What is their source? When what exists, do they come into being? When what doesn't exist, do they not? So this Deva want to pursue further how to stop this attachment. So the Buddha answered, dear and not dear have desire as their cause, have desire as their origination, have desire as what gives them birth, have desire as their source. When desire exists, they come into being. When desire is not, they don't. So the cause of suffering is desire. So if a person reacts with greed and anger to that object, then you have dear and not dear, whether you have your liking to this object or this person, or have anger to that object or to that person. Right, so that is caused by desire. Okay, clear so far? Okay, then move on to the next slide. So I talk about desire or craving. So this Deva asked further, what causes this desire? But what, dear sir, is the cause of desire? What is its origination? What gives it birth? What is its source? When what exists, does it come into being? When what doesn't exist, does it not? So the Buddha answered, desire has thinking as its cause. So basically, desire don't appear naturally by itself. So you need to think, you need to intentionally think. Thinking as its cause, has thinking as its origination, has thinking as what gives its birth, has thinking as its source. When thinking exists, desire comes into being. When thinking is not, it doesn't. So desire is caused by thinking. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the same thing, this Deva want to pursue. What is the cause of this thinking? But what, dear sir, is the cause of thinking? What is its origination? What gives it birth? What is its source? When what exists, does it come into being? When what doesn't exist, does it not? So that's where we talk about the different preconceived notions, preconceived stereotype and discrimination. Thinking has the perceptions and categories of objectification as its cause, has the perceptions and categories of objectification as its origination, has the perceptions and categories of objectification as what gives it birth, has the perceptions and categories of objectification as its source. When the perceptions and categories of objectification exist, thinking comes into being. When the perceptions and categories of objectification are not, it doesn't. Again, another Rao calling, very long-winded. Okay, so all these stereotypes will affect our train of thoughts. So all these things could be groomed from young or past karmas. So past karmas have certain inclinations, certain habits, certain stereotype. Then our train of thoughts will be based on that. And will be based on that. So certain, maybe in psychology, they will talk about personalities, different personalities. So in Buddhism, we don't really talk about personalities. We talk about all these conditions can be changed. All these perceptions can be changed. Okay, next. Okay, so we talk about how to practice to end this. And how has he practiced, dear sir? The monk who has practiced the practice leading to the right cessation of perceptions and categories of objectification. So basically, how to clear all this discrimination and stereotype and all this. So the Buddha give his so-called step-by-step solution. So the Buddha mentioned, joy is of two sorts, I tell you, Deva King. To be pursued and not to be pursued. Grief is of two sorts, to be pursued and not pursued. Equanimity is of two sorts, to be pursued and not to be pursued. So this joy and grief and equanimity can be related to the sublime states. So the grief here is more related to the disenchantment. If a person practice reflecting on impermanence, then they have not so much disenchantment, they start to let go. So they have certain sorrow and grief. So that's the meaning. Okay, so these are the few terms, and very interesting. To be pursued and not to be pursued. So the things not to be pursued are the unwholesome qualities that lead you to more suffering. To be pursued are the wholesome types of joy. There's no wholesome and unwholesome kind of joy, wholesome and unwholesome kind of grief, wholesome and unwholesome kind of equanimity. Okay, next. So the Buddha is going to first describe this first emotion called joy. Joy is of two sorts, I tell you, Deva King, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Thus was it said, and in reference to what was it said. So the Buddha is going to clarify what he means. When one knows of a feeling of joy, as I pursue this joy, unskillful mental qualities increase and skillful mental qualities decline. That sort of joy is not to be pursued. So unskillful mental qualities will be like greed and anger and jealousy and all those negative things. If it increases, then do not pursue them. If that joy, okay, so this joy probably is the hedonistic joy, materialistic joy. So if you do something unwholesome, you feel joyful. We talk about something bad. Maybe some people are addicted to shoplifting, for example, something unwholesome. They find joy in doing such things. So it's unwholesome, it makes you more unskillful, makes you more greedy, makes you more attached to those external material items. Right? So this will help you increase in unskillful mental qualities. Some of the activities we do may not be that not that criminal, but considered unskillful. Maybe for the 5 preceptors, maybe watching entertainment. Nowadays, entertainment so easily or readily available. Just turn on the screen and you can choose which channel you want. All sorts of entertainment also have. So if it increases your greed, your anger, then that kind of and you find joyful because you watch entertainment, right? You find it joyful, then that kind of joy is not to be pursued. And we talk about skillful mental qualities decline. If let's say your compassion, your loving kindness, your generosity start to decline, you become more lazy, not as hardworking, then that joy is not to be pursued. So basically that joy will lead to addiction, lead you to make you more inefficient in your work or whatever. And then the next point, when When one knows of a feeling of joy, as I pursue this joy, unskillful mental qualities decline. So it lets your greed and anger decline, and skillful mental qualities increase. You are more compassionate, you're more wise. That sort of joy is to be pursued. So these are either the concentrative kind of joy, the jhanic joy, or the vipassana kind of joy, the detachment or the wisdom kind of joy. Okay, so this sort of joy may be accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, or free of directed thought and evaluation. Of the two, the latter is the more refined. So there are few ways to interpret it. In this last paragraph, the joy that is accompanied by directed thought and evaluation is the first jhana kind of joy. It could be the first jhana kind of joy, or free of directed thought and evaluation. So this one could be the second jhana kind of joy. So for those who are familiar with the term jhanas, it's part of the right concentration in the Noble Eightfold Path. So in right concentration, it is defined as the 4 jhanas, or the 4 levels of concentration. So in the first level of concentration, it is defined as a few factors. A person, let's say they enter the first jhana or the first level of concentration, they experience this directed thought, evaluation, happiness, joy. At least 4 factors. So this is the first level of concentration. So in the second level of concentration, there's no more directed thought and evaluation, just joy and happiness. So just 2 factors. And if a person enters the third level of concentration, they have no more joy, they have happiness and equanimity. So there's a third level of concentration. And in the fourth level of concentration, they have equanimity, no more joy, no more happiness. So it's getting more and more refined, or more and more calm and peaceful. So these are the various levels of concentration. So there's another way to interpret this joy that has no directed thought and evaluation, is the wisdom type of joy. So if a person able to practice detachment, they'll trigger these 7 factors of awakening. So these 7 factors of awakening, you have this. The first factor, you need to have mindfulness, practice right mindfulness. Then the second factor is investigation of the Dhamma. The third factor is energy or effort. And if a person keeps applying this effort, continuously investigate impermanence of the 5 aggregates, or impermanence of whatever, it will trigger the fourth factor, which is called joy, Dhamma joy. When they really let go that time, suddenly so joyful, like a surge of joy will arise. So this joy has nothing to do with jhanas. It doesn't require one to fix and focus and focus. It's basically reflecting on impermanence. So when they let go, they have this certain joy appear. So this is the more refined kind of joy. So that's the fourth factor of enlightenment. And the fifth factor is tranquility. So this joy will eventually disappear. It's not forever one. So fast or slow depend on each person, but eventually will disappear. Usually quite fast. So it disappear after tranquility. Then the sixth factor is samadhi, concentration. So this concentration is not the right concentration, is not the fourth, it's not the 4 jhanas kind of right concentration. It's a new type of concentration, wisdom type of concentration. So that's a 6th factor. And the 7th factor is called equanimity. It's a stable mind, and that equanimity again is not part of the 4 jhanas. So these are few type of interpretation. Again, it is not mentioned here. The Buddha didn't mention clearly whether is it the jhanas. He just mentioned these are the two sorts of joy, with directed thought and evaluation. Directed thought and evaluation. So as long as it's wholesome, then you pursue it. So some of them is like maybe you read some case study, or you see some case study. Sometimes got some viral video or some viral meme. Someone helps somebody on the street. Then you feel joyful for them. You rejoice. You rejoice in somebody's good deed. So that joy doesn't lead to any jhanas also. Doesn't lead to any concentration. But that is a good kind of joy, wholesome kind of joy. So that itself also, you see for yourself. If it makes you more wholesome, then by all means, then you should pursue that. Okay, next. Okay, then the next one, grief. Grief is of two sorts, I tell you. To be pursued and not to be pursued. Thus was it said, and in reference to what was it said. When one knows of a feeling of grief, as I pursue this grief, unskillful mental qualities increase. So if a person grieve, get upset or feel sorrow, and then unskillful mental qualities increase, and you get more depressed, get more attachment, then that's not the good kind of grief. And skillful mental qualities decline. That sort of grief is not to be pursued. So sometimes when a person, let's say if you think you're practicing compassion, or this person you wish them free from suffering, then you some people overdo it and do until get depression, then this is the wrong kind of grief. Or maybe your understanding of compassion not correct. Too much attachment really. Too much attachment. So a lot of those frontline workers, you help people, help until burn out, help until depressed. That means you overdrain yourself. Then you must know how to you must realign your intention. Then the third paragraph, when one knows of a feeling of grief, when I pursue this grief, unskillful mental qualities decline, and skillful mental qualities increase. That sort of grief is to be pursued. So if a person, let's say, practice compassion correctly, then by right should not get into depression. You should be more wise, more caring, more selfless. In fact, maybe even more energetic sometimes. So this is the right kind of grief. And this sort of grief may be accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, or free of directed thought and evaluation. Of the two, the latter is more refined. So interestingly, grief can be accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. So this directed thought and evaluation down here is not the jhana factors anymore, because grief is not part of the jhana factors. So the grief is not part of concentration. So if a person were to, let's say, contemplate on detachment, so one may experience certain grief. Or you think, one day everybody will go through birth and death. So there's some kind of sadness, right? So if a person can reflect on that, there's some thinking and there's some kind of investigation and reflection. So that kind of grief is the first one. Then there's a second kind of grief, free of directed thought and evaluation. So if a person mind, if let's say you want to talk about a top-down approach, if a person mind is enlightened, totally free, don't have to think, but the mind naturally have dispassion, have grief, and naturally have compassion for things. So that is the more refined one. Okay, next one. Then we have equanimity. Equanimity is of two sorts, I tell you, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Thus was it said, and in reference to what was it said. When one knows of a feeling of equanimity, as I pursue this equanimity, unskillful mental qualities increase, and skillful mental qualities decline. That sort of equanimity is not to be pursued. So we call this the mundane kind of equanimity. So earlier on we talked about the example, if you purposely bochap, you don't see, don't hear, you may not solve the internal defilement problem, You're avoiding the issue. So when you avoid the issue, there's no quarrel, there's no turmoil, then you think the mind is very equanimous, very peaceful. So some people, when they go for a retreat, or some people organize retreat, totally no work for them, so it's whole day just for them to meditate. So very peaceful, not like at home you need to work, need to do chores. So no chores, no nothing, So they think, my mind has reached equanimity, so peaceful. But once after the retreat, they go back home, back to square one. No more peace already. They need to think, they need to work, they need to plan and worry. So no more equanimity. So that is not the true kind of equanimity. That is basically, we call it bochap. You kind of heck care of the situation. It's not the real kind of equanimity. So it doesn't uproot the defilements. You're just avoiding the issue. Then we go to the third paragraph. When one knows of a feeling of equanimity, as I pursue this equanimity, unskillful mental qualities decline and skillful mental qualities increase. That sort of equanimity is to be pursued. So if, let's say, you practice, your greed and anger reduce, and your wisdom increase, you get more compassionate, then that is the right kind of equanimity. You should pursue that equanimity. So the mind is more balanced. So that means you still carry on your duties and responsibilities, but the mind can remain equanimous. Then that is the actual kind of equanimity. That means you're not emotionally shaken. Okay, and this sort of equanimity may be accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, or free from directed thought and evaluation. Of the two, the latter is more refined. So a person can contemplate on concepts leading to equanimity, or a person may directly experience this equanimity. So in reference to the jhanas, the four right concentration, in the fourth level of concentration, or even in the third level of concentration where equanimity is present, the directed thought and evaluation don't exist anymore. So it may apply to the second type of equanimity in the last paragraph. Or, again, we talk about the 7 factors of enlightenment. So the 7th factor is equanimity. Right? So that is the more high-end or more refined kind of equanimities. So the first one, which require directed thought and evaluation, basically is it's like you purposely need to think to make the mind still. You need to keep generating your attention and whatever or whatever reflection you do to make the mind still. So it's more like initial phase, or more towards the not concentrative phase. That means before concentration. So a person may have equanimity, a wholesome kind of equanimity, but not yet reaching concentration. Okay, next. Then Sakka, having delighted in and expressed his approval of the Blessed One's words, asked him a further question. But how has he practiced, dear sir, the monk who has practiced for restraint in the Patimokkha? Okay, so this one is like, he already got the answer, but then not detailed enough. What are the practices leading to those emotions, joy, grief, and equanimity? You need to have a proper SOP, like a step-by-step guide. Step-by-step guide, how to have these states of concentration or states of detachment. So the Saka asked this further question. Bodily conduct is of two sorts, I tell you. So the Buddha replied, Deva King, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Verbal conduct is of two sorts, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Searching is of two sorts, to be pursued and not to be pursued. So again, back to the foundation. Very important for your day-to-day living behavior. It's not like, okay, I want to free myself from envy and stinginess. I just sit there, force myself to meditate, and immediately can generate thoughts of detachment and joy and equanimity. No. If our daily life, moment-to-moment behavior is not in line with the Dhamma, a bit hard. Yeah, and because all these, we talk about Noble Eightfold Path is like a wheel, 8-spoked wheel, they are all linked together. Yeah, so I think we mentioned this in the earlier lessons also, so I don't want to keep repeating. Okay, next. So bodily conduct is of two sorts. I tell you, Deva King, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Thus was it said, and in reference to what was it said, when one knows of bodily conduct, as I pursue this bodily conduct, skillful mental qualities increase and skillful mental qualities decline. That sort of bodily conduct is not to be pursued. So all the precepts, the one we chanted earlier, will eventually lead to the skillful or unskillful state of mind. So all these are training rules to train what? To train our mind, Lord. When one knows of bodily conduct, as I pursue this bodily conduct, unskillful mental qualities decline and skillful mental qualities increase. That sort of bodily conduct is to be pursued. Right, so basically observing the precepts and basically having the right kinds of reflections. Next. Verbal conduct is of two sorts. I tell you, Deva King, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Thus was it said, and in reference to what was it said. When one knows of verbal conduct, as I pursue this verbal conduct, unskillful mental qualities increase and skillful mental qualities decline. That sort of verbal conduct is not to be pursued. Yeah, so to refresh the memory, let's say for the bodily conduct, the unskillful one is the killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. And if you want to add in taking of alcohol, intoxicating drinks and drugs. Okay, then for the verbal one, the unwholesome 4 speeches, telling lies, harsh speech, idle chatter, divisive speech, 4 unwholesome speeches. Okay, then the next one. When one knows of verbal conduct, as I pursue this verbal conduct, unskillful mental qualities decline and skillful mental qualities increase. That sort of verbal conduct is to be pursued. So interestingly, we haven't really touched much on the wholesome kind of bodily conduct and wholesome kind of verbal conduct. Do you all want to share what kind of wholesome bodily and verbal conduct? Maybe we did, like for example, bedside counseling. So that will consider acts of goodness, bodily and verbal, charity, generosity. So all these things will lead to wholesome verbal and bodily conduct. Anybody else want to share anything? Okay, no, okay, then we move on to the next one. Okay, searching is of two sorts, I tell you, Deva King, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Thus was it said and in reference to what was it said. So searching, people normally equate searching is like craving. Some people say, I search for the truth, I search for enlightenment. Then searching is craving, got desire. So is desire bad or not? So again, this searching got wholesome and unwholesome kind of searching. So craving, desire has wholesome and unwholesome kind of desire. The Pali word, the unwholesome kind of desire is called tanha, T-A-N-H-A. The wholesome kind of desire, the Pali word is called chanda, C-H-A-N-D-A. So it's very different term. Okay, so I'll just read through. When one knows of a search, as I pursue this search, unskillful mental qualities increase and skillful mental qualities decline. That sort of search is not to be pursued. So this one is the mental intention really, our search Let's say you're searching for which channel, what kind of website you search, what kind of item when you're shopping you want to search. So you have to look at your intention. And the third one, when one knows of a search, as I pursue this search, unskillful mental qualities decline and skillful mental qualities increase. That sort of search is to be pursued. That is how he has practiced, Deva King, the monk who has practiced the practice for restraint in the Patimokkha. So in line with the ethics, the guidelines. So that eventually have to look at whether it improves the skillful mental qualities or not. Okay, next one. Then Sakka, having delighted in and expressed his approval of the Blessed One's words, asked him a further question. No end, still more. So after knowing the bodily conduct, so this is more on the mental training really. Mental training. Very similar to the previous sutta. But how has he practiced, dear sir? The monk who has practiced for restraint with regard to the sense faculties. So this is moment to moment, your sense contact, your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. Forms cognizable by the eye are of two sorts, I tell you, Deva King. To be pursued and not to be pursued. And same with the hearing, the smelling, tasting, touching and thinking. To be pursued or not to be pursued. Okay, next. So some people, if let's say you cannot remember all the rules, like the monk got so many precepts, cannot remember all. Then go back down to check your own moment to moment, your awareness, your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. Does it lead, if you have any contact to whatever you crave or whatever you're searching or seeking from your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind, does it lead to wholesomeness or unwholesomeness? So that's the gist of it. Okay, when this was said, Sakka, the Deva King, said to the Blessed One, Dear Sir, I understand the detailed meaning of the Blessed One's brief statement. If, as one pursues a certain type of form cognizable by the eye, unskillful mental qualities increase and skillful mental qualities decline, that sort of form cognizable by the eye is not to be pursued. So this time round is not the Buddha answer. This Deva know the pattern of what the Buddha is going to say already. So the Deva answer try to give his answer first before the Buddha answer. But if as one pursues a certain type of form cognizable by the eye, unskillful mental qualities decline and skillful mental qualities increase, that sort of form cognizable by the eye is to be pursued. Same the hearing, the smelling, tasting, touching, and so on. So let's say some people practice mindfulness. Nowadays they talk about mindfulness eating. And we eat at time slowly, then you must know the taste, enjoy the taste. You must see whether you increase your greed or decrease your greed. Are you practicing to be a food connoisseur, or no, practicing to detach from the taste, sense of the taste? So you have to look at this one. Okay, next. Okay, so I end my sharing for today. A bit technical for today, so I open the floor early for Q&A. Any questions from the floor you want to ask, and open the mic, or you can type in the chat.
Right. Anyone with questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask Bhante directly, or type in the chat box. Hey, Bhante, I can start the ball rolling.
Okay.
Could you explain, like, for example, in terms of, because right now I'm teaching teenagers, and one of it is like saying appropriate content, especially on the internet. And then one of the feedback, one of the things that I get is when they say this undesirable content, what happens is, even though they try to stay away, right, there's this very strong feeling that will lead them towards wanting to do it again and again. So is there any strategy that I can help them? If they are not seeing this content is one thing, but apparently the images all that are already stuck in the mind. So what can they do to help themselves not to fall in further?
Yeah, very good question, right? So for teens, right, for children or teens, they are actually professionals or special organizations that deal with this. They specialize in training educators to teach young people how to navigate through the web safely, or how to avoid this content, or understand the dangers of this content. Yeah, so it requires specialized trainers. So not all of us may be equipped to do this, but for teenagers, they are the age where they start to logic and reason. So you need to tell them the rationale, why a person you cannot search this website, and if a person do, what will happen, what are the harms, what are the consequences, or are there any case studies, any examples of people who are, let's say, addicted to certain harmful kind of behaviors or kind of habits, and what kind of bad kind of consequences. Yeah, so you need to talk about this, create this awareness.
So Bhante, let's say with this bad habit of, let's say, seeing the undesirable content on TV, right? Is it because of the karma that if he cannot control that urge to want to do it, and then after that they'll regret and say, okay, I don't do it again, it's bad. But the next time comes, it seems that the force is so great, again he'll do it again and again. Is it because
so
of
basically
karma?
this is addiction. So addiction can appear in all age groups, because as long as we are in samsara, we will have addiction. So all emotions, all sensations, all stimuli are subject to clinging. So clinging is actually addiction. So that's the part. So for Buddhist philosophy, we talk about lots of right effort to overcome clinging. Yeah, you need to overcome the craving that leads to that clinging. So lots of right effort. So if the person has no intention to change, then a bit hard. But if the person has a strong, have this will to change, they have the mindset they really want to change, then you need proper mentors or guides to coach them to slowly change the habit lah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Any questions? You can just unmute yourself and ask Bhante.
So the similar examples I normally give are like gambling addicts, or those alcohol addicts. They know all these habits are bad for them, Some of them even gamble until bankrupt or drink until economic problems, social problems, start to abuse the family. Family start to break up and stuff like that. They know it's bad, but then it's already addiction, really, psychological and physiological kind of addiction. So all these logic, they know is bad, but emotionally there's a attachment, clinging. So in order to overcome the clinging, you need a stronger, wholesome emotion to overcome that. So that's why earlier on in the PowerPoint slide, between the Deva and the Buddha, the Q&A, the Buddha mentioned you need this joy, the equanimity, very strong, wholesome kind of emotion to counteract the hedonistic kind of emotions. Because,
Bhante, sorry. You mean like, okay, if now I have a problem with gambling, for example, so if I can experience Dharma joy, then that would help me to overcome this very strong urge to want to gamble?
Yeah, it's an incentive. Then you need to put in effort and work more on it. Because personally, I did volunteer in prison counseling under the Buddhist fellowship. So for the past years, especially before COVID, I kind of go there like twice a month. So we go there, and they have a special class for Buddhists, who sign up for these Buddhist kind of counseling for the prison inmates. So these inmates, a lot of them, they will say, I study Buddhist class before, I go to Sunday school before. So they know the theory, but they still commit the crime. And because some of them are addiction. So in logic, we know it's bad, but sometimes emotionally, the addiction is a different thing. So human beings are not logical creatures, or most people act on emotion, feeling and perception.
And Bhante, how come that urge is superbly strong that person becomes just so helpless to even stand up to it? Is it because they suppress it for so long that when it bounce back, the power comes back much more powerful?
They over-rely on it. So that become like their crutching, their crutch mentality, their source of anchor whenever they face issues. Like a drunkard, let's say a person who is addicted to alcohol. Anytime got problem, go to the beer, go to the alcohol. So that's the only way to solve their problem. So over maybe many months or many years, so that's the only solution they know.
Oh, so it gives them the wrong kind of joy in a way?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
One day I'm now in the prison counseling as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I just went today. Yeah.
Under which organization? SBF?
Yes, SBF.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So same thing. Actually, talking about this, I have a question is that they are very positive at this moment because they are all under control. So actually, how do you encourage them that, because quite a few of them are actually returner. They went out and then they return again. Actually, how to encourage them to actually keep on their possibility, their being positive, and then
make sure they become non-returner.
Yes.
Don't return to the prison. Actually, a lot of them, they a bit hard. Okay, there's a lot of external factors which make them want to return to prison again. Sometimes it's like if they commit certain crime, then their family all abandon them lah. So they have no incentive to go back to their family or rebuild their family. So that could be one possibility. Or if they in prison for too long, then they go outside, cannot find job, cannot survive really, So they come back in the prison, got free food and everything. So free lodging, don't have to pay rent. So so some of them might want to do this. So a lot of the program like halfway houses, and probably there are other kind of institution in place to help those people those prisoners who exit and transit to like a normal societal life. But some of them, if they do not have the external support, then they will want to go back into the prison again. Or if let's say they go outside, the only support are the criminals. their peer support are the friends they have is all the the gangsters and the addicts and whatever. Then they will lead them back into the prison again, no? Yeah, so a bit hard lah.
So actually, what my thought was, when I left the place, I really thinking like, when they go back, is it due to the karma again? I come back to is it due to the karma that they leave the prison and then they will still meet up with their old friends and then those.
Yeah, sometimes a lot of them is their choice. Because if they go through like the halfway house program, they have like the yellow ribbon kind of project to help them find jobs and stuff like that to slowly reform. So a lot of them do not want to go through this halfway house kind of transition, because if they stay in a halfway house, they are restricted. They need to return by what time and report, and they need to have lights out by what time. So a lot of them don't want this. They want to have like freedom, and when they do all the have too much freedom, they might end up in the wrong track again. Yeah. So you need to remind them, okay, go to the halfway house. And if let's say the halfway house allow, I'm not sure whether they have these groups, allow religious groups to go in, give them support, then there'll be bonus lah. Okay.
Hi Pante. To add on to this question, let's say don't talk about the more serious like crime one, more like daily addiction, let's say addicted to social media or that. What is your first guideline on the first step that we can take to start reducing this kind of like craving and addiction?
Okay. So once in a while it's good to have like a retreat mode where you kind of like have no social media, nothing, no phone. Yeah, once in a while do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Then you can check the peace of mind without it. Do you use it out of necessity or out of addiction?
Okay.
So there's a difference. Yeah.
Okay.
So once you're able to live without it, and you don't have like the withdrawal symptoms, you won't get depressed or moody or dysfunctional, then it's not addiction.
Okay. Yeah, and also you share just now, let's say the joy for the wholesome type of joy, maybe can also do something that is more wholesome to try to replace the habit.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a habit that we look at social media or movie so that we can we feel joy and reduce stress in work, right? So maybe it can replace with other wholesome activity.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the things you search have to be wholesome, the content you search. Make sure you have whatever you watch has a right kind of reflection. Yeah.
Okay. And another question just now, you mentioned the envy and stinginess. That one is caused by attachment.
Yep.
So both envy and stinginess are caused by attachment. Same root cause, is it?
Caused by what?
The same root cause, because I think
yeah.
I heard wrongly. I thought you only explain on the stinginess part, not much on the envy.
Yeah, envy and stinginess I would equate with the dependent origination model as becoming. Envy and stinginess, because you want to possess something. You envy. Envy means you haven't possessed, but you want to possess someone else's things. Yeah, so you envy. Yeah? Then stingy means whatever you have, you cannot let go. Yeah, so this we call becoming.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's caused by clinging, by attachment.
Okay. How about when we face someone because of envy, the person like talk bad about us or step us down? So in this kind of situation, how should we do and react?
Envy. How to be envy with someone criticizing us?
Because because let's say we achieve something, then the person because of envy.
Oh,
of
their
our
envy. Okay,
achievement,
okay,
yeah.
okay. I didn't
The
get your
person
question
envy
earlier.
of
Okay.
our achievement, then they talk bad about us or like put us down. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so other people's mouth cannot control, lor. So we can only protect our own mind, you see. So there are a few ways to go about it. The mundane solution is to go and talk to the person, no. Go and ask, find out, no, why you say this? Is there some misunderstanding? So it's no civil way lah of solving the issue. Then if that still doesn't work for whatever reason, then you have to see for yourself how damaging is that their kind of attack. Some people might even want to go to the extent of like going to the court cases and stuff like that. It depends on how serious it is, depends on who you want to protect also, or what you want to protect. So again, depends on how much you let go also lah. Yeah.
So for our own reflection, how should we reflect?
Okay, so this one is again case by case basis because everybody has a different workload, different duties and responsibilities in life. So you need to measure that against your own inner peace also lah. So it depends on which one you prioritize more. Sometimes some people require both actually. Yeah, you cannot say, okay, everything bo chap, let you criticize. Then the whole organization go down. Then let's say the employers under you, no job and stuff like that. So you need to look into that also. You need to find your own moderation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ming Hui. Anyone else with a question? Mui Ling? Any thoughts, comments?
Hi, Bante.
Okay, hello.
Perhaps not so much a question, but as we were going through one of the slides earlier that talks about grief, actually just last night I had dinner with one of my girlfriends. So she was sharing with me that she is undergoing this grief period. Just 1 to 2 months ago, she underwent a divorce. So because she's now going back to an empty home, she adopted a hamster to keep her company at home. So her hamster 2 weeks ago passed on. So I think the issue with her is she got very attached to the hamster after her divorce. So she needed a companion, you see, at home. But when her hamster passed on, she's now into this grief mode. Quite bad, I would say, because when she was sharing with me over dinner yesterday, she will tear and cry when she mentioned about her hamster. So about the wholesome and unwholesome thoughts, I was really thinking hard yesterday how to educate her that it's actually part of life, whether or not it's a fellow human being or a pet. Life and death is really a part of life. But of course, when she's now in this whole situation, it's very hard for her to step out from it. So like in this kind of instance, let's say if we know someone who is undergoing grief, it may not be a pet, it could be a loved one. What can we do or what can we say in a very simple layman way to make them feel better and enable them to find their way to step out from grief?
Okay, yeah, this is a very good question. So as a monk, we get lots of invitation for funeral services, do funeral chanting. So we will come across the living relatives who are upset and weeping, and we call this grief management. So we need to give them sermon also, how to cope with this grief. So normally we talk about assure them that the deceased has passed on, that we are able to dedicate marriage to the deceased. Yeah, so it's not like, oh, they are gone to a very bad place. So even if it's a very bad place, you still can help them. So in order to help them, you cannot be in an unwholesome state of mind for too long. So encourage them to do more good deeds, do volunteer work, channel the energy somewhere. Don't have nothing to do, then the mind will be thinking of, this person passed away, this person passed away. So you need to dissipate, channel the energy to do something wholesome. Can be a prayer, maybe Tibetan. When I was in my teens, I faced some crisis also. So the time I do this 35 Buddha prostration, the confession. So every day do lots and lots of prostration. You're tired already. You're tired, no time to grieve anymore. So you can do certain exercises, prayers, meditation, whatever that can dissipate the energy. So if you have friends, the good thing is that's your first responder. As a friend, you need to be there by the side to have a listening ear. The main thing is listening ear. Don't have to give too much suggestion, just listening ear. Because sooner or later this emotion will subside. But if let's say the friend asks you for a suggestion, then give suggestion. No, if not, you just listen, console. Yeah, so that's the best you can do. So along the way, when they are doing these good deeds, they perform marriage, they will give them certain peace or joy that is like a tug of war between depression and this volunteering kind of happiness or generosity kind of happiness. So over time, this sadness will go away, and if they overcome this turmoil, they'll gain more wisdom. They'll grow. Yeah, so that's the idea. So encourage them, ask them to do something positive, and then dedicate marriage to the deceased. So it's a win-win situation for the deceased and also for the living relatives. Yep.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, Wei Ling. Yeah, anyone else? What about Tzu Jia? You have a question?
Yeah, Bante, I may have a question. I come across this phrase that says, see things as they are. How do we actually apply it in everyday life? What do we mean by see things as they are? Do we not see the intention behind anything?
Okay, so this term very subjective to each person's interpretation. So normally this term is a slogan for the Vipassana, for insight and wisdom. So if you want to see things as they are, in the Buddhist context would be to understand the 5 aggregates and the 6 senses, how they arise and pass away. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. So eventually it should lead to skillful states of mind. That means you see things as they are, they must detach, must feel happy, must feel more peaceful. So that's the whole idea. So some people, let's say they go for Vipassana retreat or Vipassana courses. Some of them, they feel very stressed, because they have like deadline, like the teacher will interview them. Make sure by this day, you need to progress this level. So instead of relax and seeing things that they are, they forced to see result. They get more pressure. So again, different schools have their different issues. Yeah, so seeing things as they are, the whole idea is to practice detachment. That's the end goal.
It's like don't have any kind of expectations or anticipate anything.
You can search, but need to be a wholesome search.
Okay. Thank
you. No problem. Any other questions?
Anyone else? You can also type in a chat box. Then I'll read out the question to Bhante. Would you want to give an example, like you mentioned about what Tzu Jia just said, right? See things as it is, and then not to have attachment. Or let's say, example, we are being brought to a buffet, and then all your favorite food is there. So are you supposed to like keep that frame of mind that yes, it's nice food in front, but what kind of mindset we should be having?
Okay, so normally I like to use the Zen analogy. This one is easier for people to understand. There's this Zen master, he write a poem, 看山是山, see mountains as mountains. I'm not sure you heard of this story before. Then that's the first line he wrote. The second line he wrote, see mountains as not mountains. Then the third line he wrote, see mountains as mountains. So at first when I see this story, it's like, what talking you, man? Yeah, what are you talking about? So it's actually talking about the evolution of our spiritual journey. So the first line talks about the mundane way of seeing things, the hedonistic way or the materialistic way of seeing things. See mountains as mountains. Or the mountain so grand, wow, so beautiful. Or let's say you go to buffet, wow, so nice. Or the food so cheap, wow, the food so delicious. So mundane way of seeing things. 看山是山. Then see mountains as mountains. So the second line talks about a practitioner on the journey. They have to learn to see mountains as not mountains. So they have to see the mountains in terms of, if you want to reduce the passion of mountain, but before you want to travel and see maybe Mount Fuji, wow, because a lot of people go there, wow, so scenic, I want to post on my Instagram. But if you see mountain as not mountain, let's say you learn Buddhism, maybe the meditation teacher will tell you, okay, see mountains as 4 elements. So you start to see the mountain, 4 elements, earth, fire, wind, water. Fire, wind, water. Then it's not as exciting as before already, So this is the journey part. See mountains as not mountain. So the vipassana, when we talk about seeing rising and falling, 5 aggregates, 4 elements, whatever, rising and falling, is to see mountains as not mountains. Then eventually, if a person managed to reach enlightenment, then they see mountains again as mountains. So they don't need to purposely reflect, as 4 elements or impermanent. The mind already free already, so they just see mountain is mountain. So a lot of time meditator want to straight away go to the third line, the third phase. See things as they are. Then okay, see. But the mind still not free from greed and anger. So the mind is still, they see with greed and anger, but they think don't have greed and anger. So that's the problem. You need to go through the second phase. You must go through the second phase. You need to have right reflection, the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort, right mindfulness, right thoughts, all those right stuff. So you need to go through the second line, the second phase. See mountains as not mountains.
So Bhante, is it a little bit from my understanding, if I'm right, that means things happen because of cause and effect, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and because the time is right, certain things happen. So there's actually no need to be like so super happy because of something happened, or if we didn't get anything to be terribly upset.
Yeah, if you can reflect in a way that reduces your sadness, then yeah. And that would be a good reflection.